I never cheated before. A collective betrayal in Miami was the first and only time, I swear. My fiancée said this after I found her Bachelorette videos with 4 men. My silence before the wedding was the revenge no one saw coming. My name's Martin Herrera, and let me tell you something about what many call the American dream. It can turn into a nightmare just when you feel most confident. 2 years ago, my life was the picture of what any guy with a business degree would dream of having. I was young, successful, and apparently had everything under control. I had founded a software company that was not only surviving, but growing by leaps and bounds. It was not one of those aimless startups that live off investment funds while their owners boast of being visionary geniuses. Mine generated real profits, exceeding 7 figures annually, and all that before turning 30. My parents were thrilled. They never missed an opportunity to brag about their son at every family gathering, Christmas party, or barbecue with neighbors. You know how proud parents are. My mother would tell the story in the supermarket of how her little Martine had built a company from scratch, while my father smiled with satisfaction every time someone asked him what I did for a living. Software solutions, he would reply with a confidence that did not hide that he did not quite understand what that meant. Beyond knowing that my son earns well with computers, there was also Alejandro, my brother and supposed best friend. I thought we could trust each other without reservation. We were that kind of brothers who help each other at 3 in the morning without asking questions, with cold pizza and terrible advice. Or so I believed all my life. And then there was Julieta Ferraro. Where do I start with her? She was not just beautiful, she was stunning. She had a captivating green gaze and a smile capable of disarming any anger. But beyond the physical, she was brilliant, determined, and with that acidic humor that made me feel like we spoke the same language. For 3 years, we built a relationship that I honestly thought was real, strong, and different from all the others. We lived in a modern condominium with a granite kitchen and a huge island, one of those that looked like they came out of a magazine ad. We adopted a golden retriever, Charlie, our practice son, with his own Instagram account and more followers than many humans. We spent hours planning the future, trips, children's names, the eternal debate of moving to the suburbs or staying in the city. Even the silliest arguments, like whether the sheets should have 400 or 800 threads, seemed part of something bigger. We fit so well that our families also merged with each other. Julieta's parents treated me like another son. Roberto talked to me about business. Elena wrote to me to invite me to family dinners. My mother adored her. They went shopping together. They shared recipes and talked for hours on the phone. Everything worked with perfect harmony, as if the universe had aligned the pieces so that nothing would fail. When I decided to propose to her, I did so convinced that it was the right thing to do, not out of commitment or routine, but because I really could not imagine my life without her. I planned a sunrise hike to her favorite spot in the mountains. I hired a photographer hidden among the trees to capture the exact moment. I designed the ring personally, taking care of every detail to make it unique, perfect, hers. When I knelt before her, the sky was tinged with shades of pink and gold. I felt like the world stood still. She said yes, with tears in her eyes. And in that instant, I believed I had reached the highest point of my life. We called our families from the summit, and everyone celebrated with shouts, toasts, and promises to help with the preparations. I thought I had it all: success, stability, a woman who inspired me, and a life that seemed to have meaning. I was convinced that we had built something foolproof, a solid, mature relationship, immune to wear and tear and time. But life has a cruel sense of humor. When you are most sure, when you believe that nothing can break you, reality comes and proves you wrong. What I considered indestructible turned out to be much more fragile than I ever would have imagined. And yet, that morning in the mountains, with the ring shining on her hand and tears streaming down her face, I believed that we had overcome fate. I thought we were different, that we would be one of those couples who grow old together and make others believe in love again. I was right about only one thing: our story would be remembered, just not for the reason I expected. Let me tell you how something that seemed like a perfect love story ended up becoming a nightmare worthy of a television show. Everything fell apart thanks to one person, Camila Vega, the maid of honor and self-proclaimed expert in event organization, who turned out to be more like a hurricane in a dress than a loyal friend. Camila had been Julieta Ferraro's best friend since college, one of those unbreakable friendships that survive all kinds of drama. I always respected that bond, although to be honest, I never fully trusted her. She had that kind of personality that makes you feel uncomfortable without knowing exactly why: competitive, sarcastic, always wanting to shine more than others. She posted inspiring quotes on social media while criticizing half the world behind their backs. But Julieta loved her, so I just hid my dislike and smiled every time Camila made poisoned comments about men or about me. When it came time to organize the bachelorette party, Camila took control as if she were directing a military operation. And the truth is, I did not complain. I am not exactly the type who enjoys planning parties. So when she announced that the plan was to spend a weekend in Miami, I took it as a great idea. Sun, music, drinks, and friends. What could go wrong? The guest list was what you would expect. Julietta's younger sister, Sophia, still in that stage where you think being 23 makes you an expert on life, and about 10 more friends from college and work. They all seemed like normal women, some a little party-loving, but nothing to worry about. Or at least I thought so. The first night was everything you imagine of an elegant bachelorette party. I received the photos by message, all with colorful glasses, exaggerated smiles, and those artificial poses for Instagram. Julietta looked incredible in a black dress that made me feel like the luckiest man in the world, and at the same time a little jealous of all the looks she must have been attracting. They went to a trendy bar, danced, took selfies, and spent a fortune on bottles. The usual. The problem came with the second night. That is where perfection crumbled. Camila, always looking for something different, decided that the party should continue in a rented house in South Beach. Nothing out of the ordinary, a large Airbnb with a pool, ideal for continuing to drink without worrying about neighbors or schedules. So far nothing suspicious. But what she did not mention was the extra entertainment she had prepared. That night, she hired several men to liven up the evening. They were not simple dancers. They were professionals at fulfilling private fantasies. They brought their own music, accessories, of course, no restrictions when it came to pleasing the audience. While I was at home watching a movie and thinking about how much I missed her, Julietta was discovering a side of herself that I had never seen. The drinks flowed. Someone brought favors stronger than alcohol, and little by little the night became a spectacle that bordered on the implausible. First there were innocent laughs, then screams of excitement, and then something completely different. The dances turned into contact into participation, and my future wife, that woman who blushed when we talked about intimate topics, ended up being the center of a show that her friends cheered on between laughs. Everything was recorded. Every second, every gesture, every boundary that was broken. Camila took charge of filming it from various angles, as if it were a professional production. Maybe she did it to have memories of the trip, or maybe simply because she enjoyed the control and the thrill. And the most disgusting thing of all was that it was not just Julietta, it was a collective event. Her sister Sophia and several bridesmaids participated with enthusiasm. Camila directed the scene like a master of ceremonies, pushing each one to relax and have fun. What was supposed to be a bachelorette party became an _ disguised as a party among friends. The cruelest irony was that all that private material was automatically saved to the cloud, to our shared cloud, the same one where we stored vacation photos, memories, and wedding documents. Without anyone noticing, every video, every image, every sound was uploaded in high definition to the same place where the happiest memories of our relationship were. And that is how I discovered it. It was Tuesday, past 11 at night. I was sitting at my desk with the laptop on, reviewing wedding folders when the thumbnail started loading and I saw everything. That instant felt like a horror scene when the protagonist realizes that the monster has been living in his own house all along. I felt my heart pound in my chest, and the air escaped my lungs. Julietta returned 3 days later with that glow of someone who has just enjoyed a perfect vacation. She told me about the expensive drinks, about how Sophia got so drunk she tried to order room service from a lamp, and about how much fun they all had. Small, funny stories, ideal for telling at a family dinner. Innocent stories, at least for someone who did not know the truth. I never imagined that a simple night of work would end up becoming the breaking point of my entire life. I was finishing a project for a client adjusting the code for a presentation when it occurred to me to include some photographs from our trip to Miami the previous year. I opened the shared folder I had with Julietta Ferraro, my fiancée, looking for an image of the sunset to use on the cover. As I was reviewing the files, something caught my attention. An unknown thumbnail with a recent date. Out of habit, I clicked without thinking too much, and that is when my world came crashing down. It was Julietta, but not the Julietta I knew. She was not the reserved woman who worried about not wearing dresses that were too short, or the one who blushed when I asked her to turn around while she was changing. In that image, she appeared with a different expression, unrecognizable, and behind her was Camila Vega recording the scene with a complicit smile. For a few seconds, I thought it must be a synchronization error, a confusion of the cloud, but the file name and date confirmed it for me. Miami last weekend. I stared at the screen motionless, trying to convince myself that it was all a coincidence. But curiosity and suspicion overcame me. I opened the video, and after that I opened another and another. Each file was a new stab. Julietta, the woman who claimed to love me, appeared enjoying herself without any guilt or limits in situations we had never imagined together. There were no signs of confusion, no traces of alcohol or manipulation. No, what there was enthusiasm, laughter, freedom. Camila, of course, was the ringleader. She encouraged, recorded, celebrated every second. And to complete the picture, even Sophia, the quietest of the group, participated between laughs. It all seemed like a kind of cruel joke, a parody of the love I thought I had. I spent hours in front of the screen, unable to look away. My mind went through every possible emotion: anger, sadness, disgust, helplessness, disbelief, until something inside me changed completely. The pain transformed into a cold, almost surgical calm. It was as if my personality split in two. The hurt and emotional man was locked away, and another, much more analytical one, took control. The following days were surreal. Julieta continued to behave as if nothing had happened, planning wedding details, talking to me about flowers and menus, while I watched her feigning interest. In my head, only the images from those videos existed. Every gesture of hers seemed false to me, every smile rehearsed. We met with her parents, Roberto and Elena Ferraro, to finalize preparations, and I smiled throughout the dinner, playing the role of the perfect fiancé. Meanwhile, I was calculating how much money I had lost in deposits and contracts. No one suspected anything. I was the calm, serene, loving man. No one imagined what I knew. One night, while we were having dinner at home, we ordered Thai food and opened a bottle of wine. She was excited, talking nonstop about the wedding, the dress, how happy we would be. I listened to her, watching her in silence. I raised my glass and looked her directly in the eyes. "To the truth," I said, "the one that always ends up coming to the surface no matter how much you hide it." Julieta laughed, although her laugh sounded nervous. She clinked her glass with mine and drank, but I could notice a slight tremor in her hands. For an instant, something like fear appeared in her eyes, as if she had sensed that I knew more than I was letting on. Then she resumed her cheerful discourse about flowers and seating arrangements, while I continued to pretend that everything was fine. She had no idea that the truth had already emerged, and I was determined to make sure that everyone saw it too. There is a strangely liberating feeling in destroying everything when you know you are doing it for the right reasons. Most people get stuck in empty lies because they are terrified of change, because they prefer the known lie to uncertainty. But when you lose everything, when you discover that everything was a sham, you understand what true freedom is. That same freedom was what woke me up that Thursday at 5:30 in the morning, like every day. Julieta was sleeping soundly next to me in her old university t-shirt with her hair spread out on the pillow. For a second, seeing her so serene, I almost believed the illusion. I almost forgot what I had seen. Almost. But then I remembered those videos, and that momentary weakness passed like a bad hangover. I got up slowly, careful not to make the slightest noise on the bed. After 3 years of early risings for calls with clients on the West Coast, I had perfected the art of moving without waking anyone. I went straight to the shower. The hot water hit my face as I mentally reviewed my list. That day would mark my disappearance. Not an impulsive escape, but a carefully planned exit, almost as if it were the most important contract of my life. And in a way it was, the agreement in which I exchanged a broken and lie-filled existence for a new and clean life. Over the last week, I had put everything in order. I transferred the company's files to a secure server, discreetly closed projects with active clients, and scheduled automatic payments for the accounts that would be pending. I was not going to disappear, leaving financial disasters. I was going to evaporate without a trace. By 6:15, I was already dressed, moving around the apartment with the determined step of someone with a purpose. I took my travel bag from the closet, just enough for a few weeks, while I decided my next move. Everything else, the furniture, the photos, every little object we ever shared could stay there. I did not want any of it. Everything in that place was tainted by the truth about who Julieta Ferraro really was. While she slept, I sat at the dining room table and began to write the checks for the wedding vendors. All were paid in full, accompanied by brief notes. The event has been canceled. Keep the deposit as compensation for the late notice. The florist, the photographer, the band, the catering service, all received their money and, more importantly, their peace of mind. I would not allow innocent people to lose because of the sham I was trapped in. The note I left on the counter was as brief as it was forceful. The wedding is off. Take care. 22 words to end a 3-year relationship and an entire future. I have probably used more words to order a coffee at Starbucks, but sometimes the most devastating messages are the simplest. No explanations, no drama, no room for replies. I closed the door behind me at 7:45 and left the keys in the mailbox. By 8:30, I was already in my office, packing the few personal things that were left. My assistant watched me with concern. She asked me if everything was okay, if I needed help, if I was going on vacation. I answered with the only possible truth. I'm going to take a long break. And it was true. A break from trusting people, from believing in romantic stories, from being the naive one who thinks cloud storage is only for saving travel photos. I asked her to redirect urgent calls to my mobile and to consider the company closed until further notice. At 10 o'clock, the moving service arrived at the apartment, just as I had scheduled. They were professional, fast, and, above all, oblivious to the emotional burden of what they were packing. My books, my clothes, my computer, my coffee maker, everything that was exclusively mine ended up packed in boxes and moved to a storage unit on the other side of the city. As I watched 3 years of shared life being reduced to labels and cardboard, I felt absolutely nothing. By noon, I was in a phone store canceling my line and throwing my iPhone in the trash as if it were a contaminated object. The young man who attended me looked at me as if I were crazy, but he processed the request without a word. Then I deleted my social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, every digital trace of Martín Herrera, the successful entrepreneur and exemplary fiancé, disappeared with the same precision with which I used to debug lines of code. I went to the bank and closed the joint account. I moved my funds to a different entity, with no shared links or records. I also modified the data of my commercial accounts so that nothing could be traced. I wanted a complete break with no loose threads. The only one who received any notice was Alejandro, my brother. I sent him a short message from a disposable phone. The wedding is off. Julieta knows why. I am fine. Do not look for me for now. Minutes later, he started calling me, but I turned off the phone and threw it in another trash can. Not even he would get an explanation yet. The hotel where I checked in was so nondescript that it went unnoticed. One of those places designed for business people or for those who are between stages of their lives. Clean, quiet, no questions asked. I checked in under a false name, paid in cash, and settled into my small temporary refuge, as if I had just entered a witness protection program. Meanwhile, Julieta would wake up the next morning without understanding anything. Her fiancé would have completely disappeared, with no letters, no confrontations, no broken promises she could pretend to mend. Just emptiness. Her calls would go to a non-existent number, her messages would fall into digital oblivion, and her emails would bounce back. For the first time in 3 years, she would have to face the consequences of her actions without me serving as a shield. That night, in the solitude of my anonymous room, I smiled for the first time in a week. Saturday, June 15th, the day that was supposed to be our wedding. The end of 3 years of plans. The day Julieta would walk towards me in that ridiculous dress she had worked so hard for. The day I supposedly promised to love her until death. Instead, I was in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle drinking my third espresso while finishing the most personal project of my life, a website. Being a developer has its advantages. It teaches you to think in systems, in causes and effects, in elegant solutions to complex problems. And her adventure in Miami had posed an interesting question to me. How do you make someone face the consequences when they are convinced they have escaped? How do you ensure that the truth reaches the public that deserves to know it? The answer was as simple as it was effective: create a website, but not just any site improvised out of spite. It was a work of professional precision, a digital monument to responsibility, built with the same meticulousness that I applied to million-dollar projects. Clean design, optimized speed, perfect for mobile, and with a positioning strategy that would make any marketing expert cry with envy. The domain chosen with surgical precision, julietaferraro.com, her full name, visible, unmistakable, registered through a private service, paid for 3 years, and hosted on a server prepared to receive an avalanche of visits. The homepage was sober and elegant. Her name at the top, followed by a simple phrase: "The truth about a weekend in Miami." Below, a brief text explained what the visitor was about to read. No insults or emotional outbursts, just facts exposed with the clinical precision of a forensic report. The files I am about to mention were automatically uploaded to a shared folder during a bachelorette party weekend in Miami, Florida. The content found there did not require explanations or additional comments. It spoke for itself. The initial warning was simple and direct. The following material has not been edited. Discretion is advised when viewing. There were no accusations or dramatic speeches, just raw facts with the interpretation left to the viewer. Sometimes the most devastating truth is the one that needs no words. The videos were arranged chronologically, starting with innocent group images and gradually escalating to the main event. Each file had only a timestamp and its duration, with no sensationalist titles or attractive descriptions. It was not necessary. The content was disturbing enough, without the help of marketing strategies, but that is where my professional experience came in handy. I did not just upload the material without more. I optimized every detail. I compressed the files so they would load quickly. I added different resolutions according to the connection speed, and even incorporated automatic subtitles for accessibility. If I was going to destroy a reputation, at least I would do it with production quality. On a technical level, it was impeccable SSL encryption, distribution through a CDN for global access, and an analytics panel that allowed me to see in real time how the world was discovering Julieta Ferraro's double life. I even added automatic sharing buttons for social media. Why should I be the only one to spread it if her own acquaintances could help me propagate the truth? The symbolism of publishing this on the same day we were supposed to get married did not escape me. While the guests were preparing to attend what they thought would be the union of Martín Herrera and Julieta Ferraro, they instead received a text message with a link to the website and a brief note. This is why there is no wedding today. Brief, clear, and guaranteed to grab attention. I watched the visitor panel with the same concentration with which a stockbroker follows the market. The first access came at 10:47 in the morning, probably from Julieta herself, desperate after seeing her name circulate through forwarded messages. From there, the figure grew without pause, 10:50, then hundreds of people sharing the link like an unstoppable digital fire. The locations were revealing. Seattle, where we lived, Miami, where she had committed her betrayals, Los Angeles, where Roberto and Elena Ferraro resided, and dozens of university towns where her old sorority sisters still remembered her. What for Julieta was a nightmare, for me was pure justice. By noon I knew the message had reached those it was meant for. The disposable phone I had bought for the occasion began to vibrate nonstop. Blocked numbers, probably her, trying to communicate from some borrowed mobile. Others were, without a doubt, her parents, furious and demanding answers they would never get. There were also old acquaintances who, without intending to, had become privileged spectators of the public demolition of the sweet and innocent Julieta Ferraro. The most satisfying thing was to see the downloads. They were not just watching it, they were saving it, they were sharing it. Even if the site disappeared the next day, the material would remain scattered in screenshots and recordings. The internet does not forget, and I had just given it something it would remember for a long time. Around 2 in the afternoon, I received a notification. Someone had tried to report the site for revenge content. A futile gesture. Legally, there was nothing to be done, as all the material had been recorded and uploaded to a shared account by herself. In other words, Julieta was the one who had published it. I just presented it more efficiently. The comments did not take long to fill the page. Incredulous ex-coworkers, childhood friends asking if it was really her, and old acquaintances of Camila Vega, the trip's organizer, contributing their own anecdotes about previous similar adventures. The network became judge and jury, and the verdict was unanimous, guilty. As night fell, on the same date we were supposed to be dancing the wedding waltz, I closed the laptop and breathed calmly. Julieta Ferraro had wanted to play at having it all. The perfect fiancée by day, the hidden woman by night. Now the whole world knew exactly what kind of cake she had been celebrating with in Miami, and I made sure that every bite would choke her. They say that throwing a stone into a pond generates ripples that last long after it sinks. Mine was like detonating a nuclear bomb in a children's pool. The shockwaves were a sight to behold from my seat in the digital purgatory. The first side effect occurred the following Monday, 72 hours after I published. Her boss at Morrison Marketing called her into his office for a meeting that, I can imagine, was the most awkward moment of her career. Julieta worked at an agency that handled family brands, cereals, toys, organic baby products, companies that lived on trust and good reputation. And there is nothing that contradicts that image more than one of their employees starring in an explicit video at a bachelorette party. According to my contacts, because yes, I had contacts, the conversation was brief. Julieta, we are aware of the material circulating on the internet where you appear. Although we respect the private lives of our employees, several clients have expressed their concern. Translation: you are fired. The official argument was to protect the integrity of the brands. The reality is they were ashamed to have hired someone who thought a group video in Miami was a good idea to say goodbye to being single. That same afternoon, she was escorted out of the building, her access blocked, and her corporate laptop confiscated. 3 years of effort cultivating relationships and climbing in her field destroyed in a single weekend. And that was just the beginning. The real tragedy began when Roberto and Elena Ferraro found out. Pillars of their community, active parishioners at St. Mark's Church. They were suddenly flooded with calls from acquaintances who had stumbled upon their daughter's debut on the internet. Imagine being almost 70, a lifetime of impeccable reputation, and suddenly your social circle calls you to ask if you have seen what your daughter does in a video. The priest himself visited their home to talk about family matters. According to Sofia, who witnessed part of that call and later recounted it with a few drinks too many, Roberto's words were, "We did not raise a vulgar woman, and we will not pretend that we did just to protect you." Elena added with tears, "How could you do this to us? How are we going to look people in the eye again?" And so, Julieta Ferraro was practically orphaned at 27. Her parents not only disowned her, they eliminated her existence from the family. They took down her photos, transformed her old room into a sewing room, and deleted her name from the list of Christmas cards. The social condemnation was immediate and merciless. Those who had previously applauded her wedding now avoided her as if she were contagious. Her friends changed sidewalks. The neighbors locked themselves in their houses, and the coffee shop, where she was a regular customer, began to treat her with the coldness reserved for difficult customers. But the show did not end there. The domino effect also reached Camila Vega, the brilliant maid of honor who had filmed everything. Her fiancé Nicholas discovered with horror what kind of creative work his future wife had done in Miami. It turns out that Nicholas was one of those old-school men who still believed that fidelity had real value in a relationship. Incredible, right? His breakup with Camila Vega was so scandalous that it practically deserved its own narrative arc on social media. He not only left her, he did it publicly. He published a long message on Facebook that began with, "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them," and ended with, "Some mistakes cannot be forgiven and certain trusts are never rebuilt." To top it all off, he tagged her to make sure everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Two of the bridesmaids, Lorena and Natalia, both married and with children, also faced immediate consequences. They had to explain to their husbands why they thought participating in a group game during a bachelorette party was an acceptable idea. Lorena's marriage collapsed in a matter of days. Her husband filed for divorce, demanding full custody of their twins. Natalia, on the other hand, managed to convince her husband that she had been too drunk to understand what she was doing, although the damage was already done. The trust was never the same. The most satisfying fall, however, was that of Clara, the elementary school teacher, who had been the most enthusiastic during that night. The school district did not share her enthusiasm when the videos came to light. As much as it was her private life, the presence of a teacher in explicit material was enough to cause a public scandal. Parents complained. The school board intervened, and her teaching license was revoked before she could utter the word ethics. Even Sofia, the sweet and seemingly innocent younger sister, ended up paying the price. Her job at the nonprofit organization where she worked remained technically safe. They could not fire her for having participated in legal activities during her free time. However, the looks, the whispers, and the uncomfortable conversations with her colleagues made the work environment unbearable. She ended up quitting and moving to the other side of the country to start over, in a place where her last name did not carry a digital nightmare. The most delicious irony was that they all believed that that weekend in Miami would be just an adventure without consequences. Just girls having fun before Julieta Ferraro got married. They thought that what happened in Miami stayed in Miami, like a twisted version of the Las Vegas rule. But no. Their night of freedom transformed into a public lesson on how actions have consequences and how those consequences can go viral worldwide. They wanted to turn the page. I made sure that the internet would never let them do it, and in the midst of it all, I remained in absolute silence. My brother Alejandro was always the most emotional one in the family, the kind of person who gets moved by Pixar movies and believes that everything can be solved with a good chat or a group therapy session. So when he managed to find me 3 weeks after the website went public, he expected to see his older brother shattered, drowned in tears and whiskey bottles. But what he found was something else. I was in my hotel room, which had been turned into an impromptu command center, a tiny table filled with printed documents, notebooks full of notes, and 3 laptops running different monitoring programs. When he knocked on the door, I let him in without getting up, focused on updating a spreadsheet with the latest reports on Julieta's social debacle. "My God, Martine," he said as he entered, looking at everything with astonishment. "What the hell is this?" "Research," I replied without looking away from the computer. "Let's call it quality control or impact analysis, if it sounds better." He sat on the bed and watched me in silence for a few minutes, trying to process that his brother, the man who had just seen his life go up in flames, was there working methodically as if he were managing just another project. He expected to see me devastated, but what he saw disturbed him even more. "I thought I would be picking up your pieces," he finally muttered. "But this is scary." I smiled at him, not with bitterness, but with that serenity I showed when I closed a perfect deal. "Why would I be destroyed? I am solving this like any other business problem. You identify the flaw, study the variables, develop a comprehensive strategy, and execute with precision. Then I showed him the files, 3 thick folders labeled with meticulous order. The first one, documentation, contained every video, every photograph, and every text message from the weekend in Miami, printed and organized chronologically with timestamps and the names of the participants. The second, background investigation, was where his eyes began to widen in surprise. While everyone thought I was hiding licking my wounds, I had actually been working. I hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent specializing in corporate fraud. Professional, precise, and absolutely discreet. In less than 2 weeks, I had in my hands the complete reports on the 4 men who participated in that night: real names, addresses, work history, criminal records, and the most sensitive thing, medical records. It turned out that one of them, a subject who called himself Thunder, carried a rather aggressive venereal infection that he had been spreading for months. Did you have her tested? Alejandro asked, glancing at the medical reports. All of them, I replied. An anonymous complaint to the Department of Health about a possible exposure to STDs at a private party. By protocol, they had to contact all those involved and recommend medical tests. Responsible public health policy, right? The third folder was titled Financial Impact Assessment. If you are going to treat a matter like a business, you need to know its costs and benefits. I had calculated every last cent saved by canceling the wedding, venue deposits, catering, honeymoon, and more than $50,000 in expenses eliminated from a marriage that was doomed from the start. But it also included an analysis of Julieta's economic situation after the scandal, loss of income after being fired, legal fees for trying to remove the website, therapy sessions not covered by insurance, and the money lost by breaking her rental contract after her parents, Roberto and Elena Ferraro, decided to disown her. Have you been tracking her expenses? Alejandro asked incredulously. Market research. I replied. If you are going to destroy someone's reputation, you should know the full extent of the impact. It is about being thorough. What really left him speechless was the timeline I prepared, a detailed project plan with phases, milestones, and deliverables that showed step by step how I had orchestrated Julieta's downfall. The first phase was the launch of the site. The second, the strategic leak to her professional and social circle. The third, the intervention of the health department. Everything perfectly structured, no improvisations, just precision and consequences. Phase 4 consisted of continuous monitoring and recording of the chain effects that were being generated. This is insane, Alejandro said, although there was a certain mixture of amazement and respect in his tone. I mean, it is completely insane, but also incredibly well planned. Thank you, I replied with a sincere smile. I have always believed that if you are going to do something, you have to do it right. A half-hearted revenge is as pathetic as anything done half-heartedly. I explained to him how I had approached the whole situation as if it were the launch of a new product, market research to understand the target audience, content creation optimized for maximum impact, a distribution strategy through different channels, and a system of metrics to evaluate results. I had even set up conversion tracking to measure how many people shared the content or commented after visiting the website. The best thing about treating it like a business project, I told him, is that it eliminates all the emotional variables. I am not doing it because I am angry or hurt, not even for revenge. I am doing it because it is the logical response to the problem Julieta created when she decided to record herself with 4 strangers and then lie to me for 3 weeks. Alejandro remained silent for a long time, observing the organized chaos that was my improvised command center. Finally, he asked what he had been wanting to know for a while. You do not feel anything, no sadness, no anger, nothing. I reflected for a moment before answering, because he deserved an honest answer. I felt everything, I said. During the first 48 hours after finding those videos, I was invaded by every possible emotion: rage, pain, disappointment, confusion, a full banquet. But then I understood that feelings did not solve anything. They were not going to make her face the consequences of her actions or prevent her from repeating the same thing with someone else. So you shut yourself down? He insisted. I redirected them, I clarified. I turned them into something productive. Julieta thought she could have fun and then go back to pretending to be the perfect fiancée. She believed her actions would have no consequences as long as no one found out. I just took care of correcting that mistake, using the most efficient methods possible. Alejandro left that day with a strange expression, as if he had just seen something that had changed his way of understanding human nature. And maybe he was right, because what he had witnessed was not a brother destroyed by a betrayal, but an entrepreneur executing a flawless plan with the same precision and discipline that had made my software business successful. The project was progressing just as planned. A year later, Alejandro did something that infuriated me more than anything Julieta had done. And that is saying a lot. considering she had literally recorded herself having intimacy with strangers 3 weeks before our wedding. My brother, in his infinite wisdom and his total lack of respect for my instructions, decided that Julieta deserved to know what had really gone through my head during those final days. According to him, everyone needed to process their emotions as if we were living in a collective therapy program. He confessed it to me one afternoon while we were having a beer at our usual bar, that simple place where the bartender does not ask questions and the old jukebox still works with records. Alejandro had that guilty look I remembered from when we were kids, and he broke something or forgot to feed the fish. I met with Julieta, he said, dropping it like a bomb while I had not even finished sitting down. I froze. You did what? She has been calling me for months, he explained, leaving messages asking to talk for 5 minutes. She wanted to understand what happened, why you disappeared without giving her an explanation. There was nothing to explain, I finally replied, taking a long drink. The videos said it all: high definition, multiple angles, clear sound. In fact, Camila could have gone professional in documentary filmmaking. Alejandro ignored my sarcasm. He had that serious, stubborn expression he always adopted when he was trying to save my soul. She is devastated. Martín, he said, you have no idea. She has lost like 10 kilograms. She does not seem to sleep, and she cannot go out without being recognized for what you published. Good, I replied without hesitation. Actions have consequences. She chose to document her betrayal, and I made sure those documents reached their natural audience. Cause and effect. That is exactly what worries me, replied Alejandro, leaning towards me. You talk about her as if she were a case you solved, not someone you loved for 3 years. That is not normal. It is not healthy. I repeated the same thing, that he already knew, that I was fine, that I had processed everything in my own way, and that Julieta Ferraro could remain in oblivion forever. But he, stubborn as always, had already decided that I needed some kind of emotional intervention and thought the best way to do it was to give my ex-fiancée a complete x-ray of my mind during the worst moment of my life. I told her that night, he said, and I felt my blood run cold. The night you found the videos, how you called me at 2 in the morning and were silent for 5 minutes before you could speak, how you described what you saw as if you were a witness testifying to the police without emotion, just facts. Julieta was intimate with 4 unidentified men while her friends filmed and laughed. I seriously wanted to hit him for betraying the only confidence I had made to him in that hell. Instead, I ordered another beer because alcohol seemed like a better option than jail. I also told her that you did not sleep for 3 days. He continued, that you spent that time in front of your spreadsheets, calculating how much you would lose if you canceled the wedding and how much if you went ahead with it. I told her that you said that loving someone who does not exist is worse than loving someone who does not love you. That phrase hit me because it was true. During those 72 hours I had time to analyze everything. The woman I loved, the one I planned to be my wife, never existed. She was a character Julieta played for 3 years, and I fell completely for her role. I also told her about the therapy, he added, as if that were not enough. What? I asked with a tense voice. Yes, about the sessions with Dr. Jimenez, about how you were not going to process the pain, but to make sure you came out emotionally clean, without leaving any loose ends. I told her that the doctor taught you to disconnect from your emotions as if they were a switch. I remembered the guy's face, his leather notebook, his false expression of neutrality. He charged a fortune to teach me to turn off empathy, as if it were an optional feature of the software I designed myself. For him, my sessions were a case study, not therapy. What affected her the most, continued Alejandro, ignoring my gaze, was when I told her that you had concluded that the opposite of love was not hate, that hating her would have meant that you still cared about her. You chose indifference, the most complete way to erase her from your life. Julieta cried when she heard that, he told me. She cried because she understood that I had not granted her the privilege of anger or the courtesy of a closure. I had simply eliminated her from my existence. She said she would have done anything if you had given her the opportunity, added Alejandro. That if you had yelled at her, if you had confronted her, or even let her explain, she would have fought to get back what you had. But you did not give her anything to fight against. And that was the point he did not understand. Julieta did not deserve a fight, or explanations, or forgiveness. She deserved exactly what she got. Nothing. The total absence of me. I wonder if you ever loved her, he finally said, lowering his voice. If those 3 years were real, or if you were already planning to leave her. And what did you answer? I asked the truth, he replied. That you loved the woman you thought she was, that you would have given your life for her. But that woman never existed. He finished his beer and looked at me, expecting some kind of catharsis, but he did not get it. Instead, I ordered another round and changed the subject to the results of the previous day's game. because deep down, Alejandro had told her exactly what she needed to hear, that the real punishment was not hatred or revenge or pain. The real punishment was nothingness. 2 years later, I am still living proof that the universe has a cruel sense of humor and impeccable aim for testing human patience. Life has this habit of waiting until the exact moment you think you have everything under control to remind you that you control absolutely nothing. I was in the supermarket, organic products section, under lighting so white it seemed surgical. I had a reusable bag in one hand and my cell phone with the shopping list in the other. I was debating between paying $30 a kilo for some heirloom tomatoes or giving up and buying the common ones. Valentina, my wife, wanted them for a special dinner. One of those she planned with almost scientific precision. While I was comparing prices and pretending that the expense did not matter to me, the universe decided it was the perfect time to make fun of me. I heard my name, not loud, not urgent, but with an emotional charge so dense that it felt like a direct blow to the chest. Martine, it was barely a whisper, a word suspended in the air between the gondolas full of fruit, but it was enough to freeze me. I knew without needing to turn. It is funny how the brain recognizes certain voices even when one has spent years trying to forget them. They say you never forget your first love, but what you really do not forget is the person who taught you that love can be a deception disguised as promises. I turned slowly, as if the air had become thick, and there was Julieta Ferraro, or the worn-out version of her, the woman who had once been the axis of my life, the inspiration behind my best days and the cause of my worst nights. Standing in front of the organic kale shelf with the same air of someone who does not know whether to ask for help or hide. The 2 years that had passed since her public downfall had not been generous. I noticed it all in a second. The weight loss that was not for health, the dark circles, the hair pulled back in a ponytail that spoke more of resignation than style. Her clothes seemed improvised, as if she had dressed without looking in the mirror, but the most devastating thing was her eyes. Those green eyes, once full of life, now had a dead, hollow shine, as if the fire that once defined her had been extinguished. I did not need to think too much to understand. When your entire life collapses on the big screen and the world feeds on your mistakes, you end up paying with more than your reputation. Julieta, I finally said, with a voice so neutral it could have passed for a stranger's. No emotion, just a formality. She started. Not an exaggerated reaction, but a slight tremor that ran through her, as if my voice were a physical reminder of everything she had lost. For a second I saw something in her face that I did not know if it was fear or regret. "How are you?" she asked, struggling to sound calm, although her voice trembled at the edges. There was an urgency in her gaze, an absurd need to close wounds that no longer existed for me. "I am fine," I replied sincerely. There was no cynicism in my words, just the truth. I was better than ever. My life had moved on, and the weight of her betrayal no longer sank me as before. She nodded slowly like someone receiving a blow disguised as courtesy. "I heard you got married," she said, trying to smile. "Congratulations, really." "Thanks," I replied, and almost without thinking I moved the ring on my ring finger. It was an instinctive gesture not planned, but she noticed it. Her gaze lingered on the ring, as if it were a knife slowly turning inside an open wound. "Valentina is a surgeon," I added. "We met about 18 months ago through some mutual friends." I saw her do the math in her head. 18 months. She understood everything while she was trying to pick up the pieces of her life. I had met someone new. I had fallen in love, gotten engaged and married. I had moved on. I had rebuilt something solid on the foundation she herself had destroyed. "That is great," she said with a choked voice. "I am very happy for you." I nodded with a light smile. "We are expecting our first child," I added calmly. "He will be born in the spring. Valentina is 5 months pregnant." That information hit her like a bucket of ice water. I could see it on her face before she tried to compose herself. She knew. We had talked about having children once, about names, about schools, about how we would raise ours. At one time, I had believed that that vision of the future would be with her. But now that life had become real with someone else, with someone who deserved it. Julieta blinked quickly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I am glad you found someone," she murmured. "Really, you deserve it." "I know," I replied serenely. "I am happy more than I ever was with you." And it was true. With Valentina, I had found something I never had with Julieta: stability, sincerity, and the peace of mind of not living with the fear of another lie. She took a deep breath, like someone trying to gather courage. "Martine, I know I should not do this here, but I need to say it." She hesitated for a moment. "I am sorry for everything. For how I failed you. For how I hurt you." Her voice trembled at the end. For a second I thought she was going to cry, but she held back. "Julieta," I interrupted her gently, maintaining the same neutral tone as from the beginning. It has been 2 years. Apologies are valuable only when they can still change something. Now they are just words for you to feel better. She looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness, as if she could not understand that there was nothing left to save. Do you not want to know why? She asked almost in a whisper. Why I did what I did. Why I ruined everything. I observed her for a moment. The Julieta in front of me was not the woman who had cheated on me. She was a shadow, someone who had gotten stuck in the past while I had learned to let it go. I do not finally answered. I do not want to know. What you did already explained everything I needed to know about you. The rest are just excuses. For an instant, neither of us said anything. The noise of the supermarket, the rolling carts, the conversations, the soft background music filled the space between us again. She nodded in resignation, and without looking at me again, she walked away slowly between the aisles. I watched her disappear, and a part of me felt something like compassion, but it was not love or nostalgia. It was just the echo of what once existed, now completely empty. I took the most expensive tomatoes from the shelf and put them in the cart. Valentina deserved them. I will never forget the desperate tone with which Julieta Ferraro told me. I never cheated on you before, Martine. The Miami thing was the first and only time. I swear. As if that could change anything. But it was precisely that confession that almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. That makes it worse, I replied calmly. If you had been lying to me from the beginning, at least I could think that nothing was real. But to know that you destroyed 3 years of an authentic relationship for a weekend of foolishness. It is not tragic, Julieta. It is simply foolish. She started to cry in the middle of the supermarket aisle, between the shelves of fresh vegetables. People pretended not to look while tears streamed down her face. I was wrong, she sobbed. I have been wishing for 2 years that I could undo it all. I know, I said with a firm voice. But regret comes late when the consequences are already in motion. I took a bag of tomatoes and placed it in my cart, determined to end this absurd conversation. But she insisted. You hate me. I looked at her one last time. I saw in her eyes the emptiness left by decisions that cannot be repaired. No, Juliet, to hate you I would have to still feel something for you. And I do not feel anything anymore. I left her standing there between the organic products and the guilt that will accompany her for the rest of her life. Today from my home in Seattle with a cup of coffee in front of the window and the breeze coming in through the terrace, I can say that I understood the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge binds. It keeps you chained to the past. Justice, on the other hand, liberates. My company, far from collapsing, grew more than I ever imagined. We opened offices in Portal and Vancouver, and the team grew by 60%. By stopping wasting energy trying to hold on to a broken relationship, I discovered that success comes when you eliminate emotional noise. The irony is that Julieta's betrayal was the push I needed to build something better. For the first time, I feel like I belong to a sincere story. With Valentina, there are no doubts, no lies, no anxiety. I do not need to look at her phone or wonder where she is. When you are with someone honest, peace of mind replaces suspicion. Sometimes people ask me if I still think about Julieta, and yes, I think of her, but not with resentment, more with a kind of ironic gratitude. She taught me exactly what I do not want to live through again. Alejandro recently told me that he saw her in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. I felt nothing, no curiosity, no pleasure, no sadness, just a distant recognition, like when you see a name on an old bill that no longer has value. Her story is recorded on the internet. Yes, her name is forever linked to her own decisions, but I do not care anymore. Justice was not about making her fall, but about freeing myself from everything she represented. Today my life does not revolve around her betrayal, but around what I build every morning I wake up. Watch Valentina prepare her coffee before going to the hospital and think that the real victory was not exposing Julieta, but learning not to stay where there is no respect again. People think that closing a cycle means erasing the past, but no, it means remembering it without pain. And I did it. There is no more hatred or need to prove anything. Just a quiet certainty. What is lost through disloyalty does not deserve to be recovered.